So yeah, today we're going to be talking about scaling Kubernetes at Playtika. Really a very interesting project and journey we've been going on the lessons from basically a decade plus of custom hacks, to say it nicely, into a real modern platform that we've been working on. My name's Scott Rosenberg. I'm the lead architect in the CT office at TeraSky, a global systems integrator, and with me is Shemer.
Hi, my name is Shemer. I'm also lead architect at Playtika and IT platform director.
Awesome.
Okay, so what we'd like to start is basically tell you a bit about Playtika. Playtika is a gaming company. We are running globally, multiple data centers. We are running on-prem. And we started our Kubernetes journey a long time ago when it was like Kubernetes 1.65 history. Early adopter, really focusing on our building a platform inside Playtika, which was very challenging, especially when things were not productized. We didn't have a lot of infrastructures and solutions like we have today. All of those brought their challenges. Scott?
Yeah. Right, there really was nothing, right? Like if we think back to Kubernetes at those days, kubeadm was like, ooh, this is the easy way to install Kubernetes, right? Which we know it isn't, right? And a bunch of custom hacks and custom patching and things simply needed because of that. And really, this really comes all down to one word: scale. Right? When we talk about Playtika in the initial days when I was getting involved here, we were talking about, great, we'll implement Calico. There's just one issue. We needed 3 separate etcd clusters, one for Kubernetes events, one for Calico, another one for Kubernetes itself, because you had nothing like Taifa at that time that actually dealt with spreading out my load and making sure that I don't explode my API server. There was all of these challenges that things have changed in the industry since, but being such early adopters, we had this major challenge of scale. Whether it came to external etcd or back then, there was no such thing as service type load balancer really on-prem. So custom hacks of random core DNS with route reflectors sitting on random pods that do BGP of headless services in Kubernetes, right? Everything, and I mean everything, was homegrown.
Yep, we needed to support basically a lot of historical challenges that we had carrying with us from the day before Kubernetes, which basically made us choose a lot of, let's say, initial development or initial installation on production, which caused us those challenges. We utilize KubeSpray as the basic foundation of our infrastructure, and Taylor made a lot of changes on top of it, homegrown ones. Routable pods was an issue because initially it was okay as a solution, but as time goes by, it ended as a major issue when we are running out of IP addresses, basically, which was not funny. The composition or the need to combine virtual machines and bare metal servers in order to support the workloads was also challenging because we didn't have any other solution that can make it easy.
Yeah. And really, when we look at, some of the things of being early adopters, it's not just Kubernetes, right? Playtika is a large Java and Spring Boot shop. As part of that, they use a lot of the Netflix OSS stack, right? So that's going to be things like Spring Cloud Config, things like Eureka for service discovery. It's awesome. But then Istio comes out, other service meshes come out, and you're like, ooh, I want to use service mesh for the additional capabilities. Anyone ever try to migrate between one service discovery system to another or have them co-locate with one another? It's a really fun experience. I really do not wish that on the worst of my enemies. And unfortunately, that was the situation that happened here. Being an early adopter of some of these things, which really brought us to that cutting edge, right, in Playtika initially when we're talking the 2016, 2017, 2018. We took Spring Cloud Config, for example. About 5 years ago, a feature was deprecated in Spring Cloud Config because the Spring team never thought that anyone on planet Earth would be using this one feature in the way that, well, Playtika was. The entire config service is built around this, so they had to fork and maintain a version of this because of these challenges. And that's one of the challenges that happen when we're dealing with these long-term being an early adopter, is that you end up with a lot of technical debt sometimes that you really need to deal with.
So one of those, or many of those examples of those challenges is Jenkins. We needed to tailor-make Jenkins in order to make our deployment packages run faster and better. We needed to create forking of our Helm charts. If you think about it, the desired outcome that you want to achieve is to keep on the main branch of everything and not to exclude and start to create your own branches. But unfortunately, since we had those solutions or we didn't have the proper solutions to fix that, we needed to fork the Helm charts, create our own customs, and then drifted from the main industry. On top of that, the routable pods, as mentioned before, led to IP exhaustion, and all of our custom scripts and automation that was created basically at some point in time prevented us from running faster than we could and wanted.
Right, and I think one of the good examples was this was like even the Kubernetes version itself. When you're running without a big orchestration layer, you were 2 years, 3 years sometimes behind, depending on when it was, because how do you upgrade in these on-prem environments with all these custom solutions that you need to validate, right? No vendor has validated anything for you. Nothing has been validated. It's all YOLO,
and then
right?
It takes you also a lot of time to upgrade those clusters.
Exactly. So really, this is about a decade that we've been working together and trying to figure out what we can do in this area. And the first approaches that were taken, we tried, Playtika, big customer of VMware by Broadcom now, VMware at the time. VMware had just come out with PKS, which logically stands for Pivotal Container Services, because apparently container starts with a K, now known as TKGI, but basically started with that, had a lot of promise in its value proposition. The issue is after probably double digits of versions specifically named after Playtika internally to try and make the thing scale to their scale, it simply didn't work. We then tried, as someone who works on ClusterAPI provider vSphere, we decided, great, let's move to ClusterAPI. But even that simply wasn't working. And the need to move to a mutable infrastructure, from mutable infrastructure, and all of these changes from moving to then this upstream model and moving away from the models that they had simply was failing. And what did this end up causing within your engineering teams?
So what was happening is that since we understood that it's not working, our engineering team started to lock in within our own solution, because we usually say, okay, we know it better. If the vendor cannot produce it for us, or if you cannot give it, let me build it myself, which again, in turn, is like a circle. Keeps you locked in within your own solution, which again was excellent to begin with, but as time goes by, we saw that it's being much more a downside than an upside. On top of it, it's a cultural issue that needed to be, let's say, put into the company in order to understand that we need to do things a bit differently.
Right, and a lot of this is simply, again, nothing worked at the Playtika scale. And that is because when these enterprise solutions came out, especially in the on-prem world, none of them were built for the scale that Playtika had reached at that point. We're talking about thousands and thousands of bare metal servers in their Kubernetes clusters, hundreds of clusters across multiple data centers.
Tens of thousands of containers running continuously.
Again, just remember they ran out of IPv4.
Yep.
The entire IPv4 IP space was run out of at Playtika, just to understand the scale here. And so really we came and said, okay, we need to come out with a new strategy here. And when we looked at what failed in the initial attempts, one of the biggest issues was we came at it from a product perspective. Ooh, there's an issue here. We want to get support for Kubernetes. Let's take PKS. Oh, there's an issue here. Let's go with ClusterAPI vSphere. Trying to solve a pinpoint issue instead of trying to understand what the root cause, what the root issues were, and trying to solve this in a holistic platform-wide approach was causing the failures. Because no matter what, when you move to something new, there is going to be the challenge. It's not exactly as I need it to be, exactly how I want it to be. There's always going to be compromise. But because we came at it from a product perspective, from a single element, what that prevented the ability to do is to see, oh, there's a bigger picture here that, yeah, I am losing out maybe A, B, C, and D, but look at everything else that I'm gaining from this big platform play, right? Another big thing was aligning with the industry. We wanted to make sure as much as possible that we align with the industry. That does not mean that that's, the holy grail and no matter what, we're not moving to anything else. No. If it doesn't make sense in Playtika, then we won't do it. But as much as we can align with the industry, that's going to be better. And I think the final one that I'll mention here is this challenging of preconceptions, right? We have this major challenge in every organization. It's different personas, it's different preconceptions that they have, but we're a unicorn, we're special. Everything is unique by us. Nothing will ever work by us. Small little notice, no one is that special.
Well, yeah, nobody.
Except
we can talk about it, but yeah, okay. Again, eventually, the main challenge was personal. Every time that we tried to tackle this in a different way, we hit a wall. And once we breached this concept, which was basically a combination of two things. One was a management backup that provides the ability to come and tell the organization or engineering organization, this is how we're going to work. And the other one is the fact that we coordinated and got the engagement from the engineering teams in this process. Otherwise, it would not be a success one. The other one is security. We have suffered a lot and still suffering because we are still on a migration process from the security. You need to patch your operating system, you need to create your own virtual machines, or you need to create your own images, and all of those became a very major issue while we were working on the previous platform because of everything that we just discussed. And this one also lifted, and this one also was a very big, let's say, selling point or pushing points for the management to support this move. Another important thing is my own personal belief is cooperation or collaboration with other people. In this case, TeraSky. TeraSky has been working with us for a very long time. I know Scott for, I don't know, too long, I think, for my opinion, but it takes its toll. But eventually, I think that for a person that actually works within a company that sees, and it really doesn't matter how much I see within Playtika, there is always a better view or a clean view from someone who comes from outside of our organization. And it gives you a very clarity to basically either challenge what you do, because this is what I do at my job. I challenge everybody every day, constantly. But Scott is doing the same for me, which is excellent, and he also has the visibility of what's going on with other customers, which makes my life much easier and saves me time. On top of it, we've been doing this particular project, as you can see, with a lot of internal reviews that were done within the company. So trying to understand or figure out what really bothered engineering, what really bothered the business, what really bothered the people that needs to use this system eventually as a cloud provider within our own data centers. Data-driven decision, this is, I think, the most crucial part. Everything was measured, everything was tested, and we know what we are doing based on those environments. We will share some numbers later. And obviously, the migration path was an excellent one. We settled down, we saw what we need to do, and we did it actually, we are right now a bit ahead of time because of that. Also very important, Scott.
Yeah. Right, and so let's talk about a few of the different elements really in this, let's say, new platform. And I think the number one thing was this cluster lifecycle management, right? How do we move away from this imperative type of approach with very do-it-yourself into something that's more standardized? On one hand, we want to use something like ClusterAPI. We want to be industry standards. We want to follow these approaches. On the other hand, when we're talking about the scale here and not being a master of all trades, but being a master of your trade, this is where actually we went and looked at different fleet manager solutions, right? And what we ended up going on here, the best fit for Playtika in this case, was actually Spectral Cloud, which is based off of ClusterAPI and all of this, but brought in a bunch of open source projects that we got support for all of a sudden, external secrets operator and external DNS and monitoring and observability. And it allowed us really to come and build a full solution for our end users without getting locked into a specific vendor at any point, because everything was based off of and is based off of the open source technologies, just wrapping it up into a consumable, easy way that we were able to then go and use through our automation. And I think one of the funny things is that when I went on the review of the initial Crossplane code to provision a cluster, and I looked at the name of the resource that they created, it was called, for me, PKS. the Playtika Kubernetes service because I led that initial engagement, and it was such a failure that they just decided we're going to call this one PKS. Luckily, this one has actually succeeded.
Actually working. So by doing that, a requirement that we had eventually was because we wanted to get support for open source project, and we wanted to make a very big differentiation between our infrastructure provisioning and our application provisioning, we decided to go with two approaches. So CloudStack and Crossplane are the underlying engines that fires everything. We are provisioning everything with CloudStack. There is a lot of contribution that's being done from Playtika back to the open community through our vendors that we're working with. We're working with ShareBlue in order to push CloudStack internally. And Crossplane, obviously, it's Scott help us pushing everything that relates to providers and features that we are adding. These basically give us a very solid ground to provision everything as a cloud provider. It gives us the ability to run Crossplane with all of its provider as a transparent layer that if tomorrow morning I would like to provision something else as an infrastructure-wise, then I don't need to use CloudStack, then I can only utilize Crossplane providers and use another vendor for that. It gives us a lot of peace of mind, and from the mess that we had before, we are currently running as a code with FluxCD, and everything that we tackled before is currently now seems much more reasonable. All the Helm things or forks were united from, in this case, Spectro Cloud packs or solution that we're getting from them. Leanbit and Flux, in this case, came into our desire to remove our remote storages and run Kubernetes with local provisioning for disk and database management inside. This was a major hack that needed to be solved because databases requires a lot of IOPS and bend. The other one, Flux, is in order to keep us in GitOps operation, like Streamline, any other solution, give us the consistency, the declaration control, and peace of mind from our side. Yeah. And this is the actual way we put things in production. Basically, we decided to go, as we said before, GitOps. Everything is run via Git. There is no direct access to the clusters. Nobody is allowed to deploy anything directly on the clusters. Version controlled, push to Flux. Flux pushes this downstream, and everything is getting deployed. We are currently in the phase of modifying our deployment mechanism to support this seamlessly, but this is the current state. From management control, we have the infrastructure management, which is clusters that are brain clusters, we call them. Those clusters are responsible to run the actual workload cluster, and in this case, we achieved the ability to lose, theoretically, the brain clusters, while the entire infrastructure will keep running because it is connected directly to the Flux. The only ability that you will lose if and while those management clusters are known is maybe upgrades and patching, but it's tolerable. I mean, we accepted this solution, and very important to say that all of our databases are currently running inside Kubernetes. This was also a decision that was made in order to support native running application inside, but it is also mentioned to say, or important to say, that with Crossplane, we are now able to deploy data stores outside of Kubernetes while we are keeping the Kubernetes approach, because Crossplane provider for databases and machines running outside of Kubernetes also runs inside Kubernetes.
Exactly. And there are a bunch of additional key components here, right? Things like ScaleOps, which gave us the ability to do automated sizing of our pods, which was very important here, especially considering they were the only one that supported Java and understood what heap memory was. And having that taken into consideration when you're doing auto sizing, when, 90% of your workloads are probably Java, is probably a big money saver when we're looking at this. Things like Kyverno for our policy management, an entire internal developer portal based off of Backstage, right, being used to give us really that end-to-end developer experience. Currently in the final phases of testing out vCluster, as well, which is being used for our staging and development environments, right, which is huge. And also things like external DNS and external secrets operator, replacing all of the custom core DNS, weird things with headless services, and moving to standard approaches, right? So if we take a look at really what's next, right? Number one, it's about finalizing the application dependency model. We finished the infrastructure side and the planning of all of that, and that's being rolled out currently. As mentioned, production is being rolled out now. We've already rolled out all of the lower environments. When we're talking about the application model, we're really basing it off of the open application model, which has a reference implementation already, like kubevela, for example, but we're actually basing it off of our own custom implementation with Crossplane and Kyverno and FluxCD, and really using the tools that we already have, but following that industry standard of the spec of the open application model. We're improving progressive delivery capabilities, moving from tools like Kayenta into Flagger, which is an extremely powerful way to bring this into a declarative model, and finalizing that move of all of the workloads. We're currently about 60% migrated to this new platform in just under a year. Which at Playtika's scale is a extremely good number. So
Really fast.
if we talk about just a few key takeaways here, right? Early adoption does cause technical debt, right? That needs to be noted. But that does not mean we should not be early adopters. It means that when we make the decision to be an early adopter, we have to take into consideration what that level of technical debt is going to be and already plan how I'm going to get off of that later on, right? It does not mean to be scared to make the step.
Don't.
Right?
Don't scare.
Another huge one was changing the order. The typical way it's said is build versus buy. And what we got pushed down from the management within Playtika is no, we're moving to buy versus build. We are not a master of all trades. No company is, and therefore it is buy if it doesn't make sense, because it is too expensive, because it doesn't solve my issues, then you build. But the first solution is not go build your own random unicorn. It's go and buy the solution that's going to actually save me money down the road, because I'm going to be paying way less full-time engineers to be maintaining something that no one understands, into really a buy versus build type of situation, and that really has proven itself here.
It goes all the way, like, it's not just buy versus build. It goes all the way to internal decisions. So for example, if we are talking about now what Scott just mentioned, app-centric deployment mechanism, so everything that can be and should be deployed via Crossplane provider, for example, will be done by crossover provider. If it's not, it will be migrated from Crossplane to a provider that is coming from Crossplane. So everything that standardizes our systems is the current method of work, and it's working very good up until now. Again, data-driven. Data-driven, to my personal opinion, is the most crucial part. You must measure yourself constantly, because otherwise you will never know if it's doing something. I can share that for now, we are managed to move from Playtika, moving our studios from one side to another. This is 2 major data centers. Those processes took previously 1 minute to jump between one data center to another, and it now running on somewhere around 13 to 14 seconds because of that. The time to provision clusters decreased tremendously from day and a half to maybe an hour, depends on the load on the systems. Partnership, very important. Use that. Use people that you trust. Build those trust, and not just with people like TeraSky. It also goes to the vendors. We are working with a lot of vendors that runs our production environments. In the early stages we are getting inside gives us the ability to modify the roadmap. We are basically sitting in designer sessions with the product, with the engineers, with the architects, and affect those things, again, to our benefits. And basically continuous alignment, yeah, it's sustainability. I think that it talks
right?
itself.
You
So,
will fail. We have failed
Yes.
multiple times in this project and made really, really dumb decisions. And that is fine. As long as you continuously are aligning, continuously checking, finding it, and don't be scared to cut the losses.
Yes.
So
run fast, fail fast.
exactly. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be outside if anyone has any questions.